Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mrs. G's Story Time. We are reading Rainbow Garden by Patricia St. John with permission of Moody Publishing Company, and we are reading Chapter 3, The Other Side of the Mist. When I awoke the next morning, Janet, fully dressed, was roaming around the room getting ready for Saturday at home, and the moment she saw my eyes open, she started talking. Her shyness seemed to have vanished overnight, and while I dressed, she sat on her bed, jiggling up and down, telling me about all their games and secrets. By breakfast time, I had stopped wondering what people did all day in the country. In fact, I couldn't think of how these children managed to crowd so much adventure into 12 short hours. Breakfast was over, and everyone had helped and seemed to enjoy it. Janet and Frances fought for the job of feeding Lucy, and I was afraid she might be pulled in half. But Mrs. Owen put her head around the door and reminded them that it was Frances's turn. The boys had gone off to bring in firewood, and Mrs. Owens had gone into the kitchen. It was suddenly very quiet. There was no sound at all except the gurgly sounds of Lucy eating her breakfast. I stood looking out on the window, and it was a drizzly day. I could see nothing beyond the garden gate except yellow fields and black trees. The distance was blotted out by the mist, and I wondered what I could see when it lifted. I was startled out of my daydreams by the touch of Mrs. Owen's hand on my shoulder. "Elaine," she said, "when you've made your bed, will you come and help me with the little ones' beds? And then the children want to go out and play, and I expect you'd like to go with them." I looked up surprised and not very pleased. For one thing, I did not see why I, as a visitor, should be expected to make my own bed. Mrs. Moody always made it at home. Also, what would we do outdoors on a cold, damp day like this? But I had learned in my short life to keep silent about what I thought. So I followed Mrs. Owens upstairs and started to make the beds. But I had been used to central heating and fireplaces, and I found the bedrooms horribly cold, and I shivered and looked sulky. "It's cold in the country compared to London," said Mrs. Owens, "but you'll soon get used to it. You'll need to run about and keep moving, and you'll get as rosy as Janet. This is the bleakest time of the year, you know." "Elaine, but spring is on the way. Every day is getting longer and lighter, and we shall soon have the flowers coming out, and you'll love it then." And then suddenly she started talking about my mother at school, and that was really interesting. I listened eagerly and laughed and felt quite disappointed when the noise downstairs in the hall told us that the children were ready to go out. Johnny came crashing upstairs in his boots. "Mummy," he shouted, "I found a dead rabbit, and we're going to have a funeral. Have you got a shoebox?" "Really?" said Mrs. Owens rather anxiously. "Not a very dead rabbit, is it, Janet?" "No, Mommy," answered Janet reassuringly. "It's just dead one. It's still warm." "Well, don't touch it," said her mother, hurrying down with a newspaper and a broken cardboard box. "Wrap it in this paper and some old leaves and put it in there. There, now, don't touch it again, Johnny, and wash your hands." "I'm not playing funerals," pronounced Peter grandly. "It's a game for babies. I'm going tree climbing." "Oh, no, Peter," cried Janet. "We've always played something with the little ones first. You needn't be in the procession. You can go and do the grave and ring the bell, and I'll be the priest. You must do what the little ones like sometimes. We'll climb trees afterwards." Janet, as I discovered later, adored funerals and wouldn't have missed it for anything. And the moment Peter had gone off to do as he was told, she started organizing things. "Get leaves and jasmine, everyone," she ordered, "and make the box pretty." She was interrupted by Robin bursting in. He didn't know what a funeral was, but he was terrified of missing it. "You can drive the shoebox, Robs," said Janet kindly. "Jumbo can be a black horse with plums, and we'll tie the box to his tail with a string. I'll be the taxi driver and come behind Frances and Johnny in a wheelbarrow. Oh, there's Elaine, too. I forgot her. You can walk behind and carry flowers, Elaine." "There aren't any," I said coldly, and I thought they were really quite mad. "Get your bow," said Janet, pointing to the tree by the gate, "and let's start. Peter's getting angry." We went very slowly because Jumbo, a strange, shapeless, stuffed wooden animal with 4 legs and a trunk and a tail sticking out in all directions, was being walked step by step down the path with a box thumping behind him. Peter banged the dinner bell impatiently from behind a hedge. I was surprised at what I saw around the corner of the hedge. There was a neat little animal cemetery with tiny graves surrounded by pebbles and marked with wooden crosses. On some, the names had been carved with a penknife and filled in with ink. There were graves for thrushes and rabbits, a squirrel, a mouse, and Blackie the kitten. And at the far end, a freshly dug hole lined with laurel leaves and all ready for the poor rabbit, who was laid carefully inside. Frances sprinkled a few daisies, and then it was covered up. Janet said a few words about rabbits, and they all sang a hymn. "Come along," said Janet. "We'll find Peter and go to the tree. We've got some plans to make." She picked up the wheelbarrow and gave Robin and Jumbo a ride, and I followed. Only Frances lingered, making daisy chains for the new grave. She loved the little cemetery, for to Frances the grave was nothing but a door into heaven, where nothing was hurt or killed or destroyed. But of course I knew nothing about that at this time. Mugs of hot chocolate and ginger biscuits were served out of the kitchen window at this point, and then we all set out again, leaving Robin under the kitchen window with a cat and collecting Cadwallader from his place. Cadwallader was not allowed at funerals, for once he had tried to eat the rabbit who was about to be buried. Peter had gone on ahead, and we hurried after him, joined at the gate by Frances. We ran along a muddy path and found him already seated on a low bough of a beech tree, dangling his legs and carving the bark with his penknife. He called us to hurry, saying that he would be working on his rabbit hutch all afternoon and there was no time to spare. "Frances first," ordered Peter, laying flat on his tummy along the branch. Janet gave her a lift, and Peter seized her hands and pulled. Once astride the branch, tiny Frances climbed hand over hand on into the tree like a nimble squirrel, and Johnny did the same. I was seized with horror, for I had never climbed a tree in my life, and was certain I never could. "Come on, Elaine," said Peter kindly. "You can easily reach alone. Jump, kick your legs, and wiggle around." But I knew I could do nothing of the kind. I would make a fool of myself and get hurt, and I turned my back on him. "No, thank you," I called over my shoulder. "I don't like climbing trees. It's babyish, and I'm going home to unpack." I did not turn around to look at them, but there was a complete silence for a moment or two. And then Peter said, "Oh, never mind her, Jan. She's too stuck up for us. Jump and I'll give you a pull." I walked home slowly, half blinded with tears, for I was too proud to let fall. These children, I thought, will never like me. I will never like them or their silly baby games, and I felt terribly sorry for myself. "I hate the country and I hate Peter," I muttered to myself. "I shall write to Mummy and tell her I'm very, very unhappy and I want to go home at once. I won't stay in a place where I'm unhappy. Why should I?" Then I reached the top of the little slope and I glanced backwards. The 4 children were sitting on a low bough, dangling their legs like a row of happy monkeys. They were all very close together and probably all talking at once. How stupid they were. But as I looked, I noticed something else. The sun had begun to scatter the mist and was shining brightly, revealing a beautiful country landscape with the sea in the distance. On the hollow tree nearby, a robin puffed up his breast and sang for joy. His breast was as scarlet as the berries, and somewhere, everywhere I turned, I could hear chirps and twiddlings of the birds waiting for spring. For a moment I felt almost happy. But how could I be happy when no one bothered about me, and I couldn't do what I liked? My eyes were blinded with tears, yet the robin kept on singing. Tomorrow we'll sing "The Foot of the Rainbow," Chapter 4. I love you, I'm praying for you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.